It was a humid morning in New Orleans when the first warnings began to pour in. Forecasts, emergency calls, and the steady, impossible drum of an approaching storm. By August 29, 2005, Hurricane Katrina made landfall as a major hurricane, but the catastrophe that would haunt America for years was not only wind and rain, it was water where it should not have been. The water that swept through neighborhoods after the city's flood walls and levees failed. This is a documentary account of that failure, a slow-motion horror that began long before the storm. For decades, engineers and local officials debated New Orleans' defenses. The city sat below sea level, cradled by aging levees and concrete flood walls. On the day Katrina struck, the storm surge pushed into Lake Pontchartrain and canals that thread the city. At multiple points, most notably the 17th Street Canal, the London Avenue Canal, and the Industrial Canal, flood walls collapsed. Streets became rivers, entire neighborhoods turned into floating islands, and by the time the waters receded, roughly 1,800 people were dead, and 80% of the city was underwater. The horror didn't end with the water. It was followed by days of abandonment, stranded families on rooftops, desperate calls for help, the Superdome and Convention Center filled beyond capacity, and a federal response that sputtered and failed. FEMA's paralysis, the slow arrival of rescue resources, and the chaos at command centers exposed a government unprepared for mass human need. Director Michael D. Brown resigned amid withering criticism. Congressional hearings revealed a disjointed chain of command. Behind the headlines was an even darker finding. Independent investigations, from academic teams to congressional committees, pieced together what the floodwater had revealed. Many of the levee and floodwall failures were not simply the inevitable consequence of an unprecedented storm. Engineering errors, shallow foundations, underestimated soil conditions, and cost-driven design decisions had created structural vulnerabilities. Reports by teams assembled after the disaster showed that some flood walls were built on inadequate foundations of sheet piles that did not reach a stable layer of soil. In short, these were design and construction failures that made catastrophe likelier when the surge came. For survivors, the truth felt like betrayal. The neighborhoods hardest hit were disproportionately low income and predominantly black, areas like the lower Ninth Ward, where decades of neglect magnified the death toll. Lawsuits and investigations followed. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, charged with designing and maintaining the system, faced blistering criticism. Independent panels concluded that engineering mistakes and poor oversight were central causes of the breaches. Many victims and activists called it a cover-up, technical reports buried, budget shortfalls ignored, and political decisions prioritized over safety. In the years after, millions were spent rebuilding. The Army Corps constructed the Hurricane and Storm Damage Risk Reduction System, a new constellation of levees, gates, and pumps meant to protect against future storms. But the wounds did not heal with concrete. Katrina exposed the tinderbox of social inequality and institutional failure. Where warnings go unheeded, where infrastructure is allowed to erode, human life becomes expendable. This is a true horror story, not because of ghosts or monsters, but because of preventable human error compounded by institutional indifference. The storm was natural. The disaster was, in large part, man-made. When the levees broke, the nation watched a city drown and learned a brutal lesson about accountability. The horror lives on in the photographs, the memorials, and in the uneasy knowledge that systems meant to protect us can fail, and sometimes do so exactly where society is most vulnerable.